Call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone. There's a bit of seating still in the front here. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before we begin the agenda, Councillor Sikora has informed me that he has to leave early because he has a plane to catch later. He's the seconder on the motion on shark fin. That's the last item on the agenda, and I wonder if we might move it up the agenda in order that we deal with it in his presence.
Okay. The motion is to move it forward. Is there a seconder? Okay. The question, any discussion on that? My own preference is that we ought to do council's business first, but it's up to council. Any further discussion?
No.
I mean, it's not urgent. We could defer it to another meeting.
Yeah, we will make a motion to defer then.
I'll do it till next week.
Your Worship, your suggestion that you'd prefer to do council's business first, this became council's business a week ago. And it's a matter of...
Oh, it's council's motion. It's on an item that we don't have a lot of control over. The harvesting of sharks, we don't even have an ocean that touches us, so it's a little bit more complex.
Would you like to debate it now, Your Worship?
No, I don't.
Thank you.
I don't want to debate it now, but I certainly don't want to put it ahead of the really important work that council has had scheduled for some time. So, but it's up to council. Okay. Okay, no other speakers?
I thought I saw Councillor Sikora, which is what the first one up.
Yeah, and he deleted himself, so... Okay, the motion is to move that to the first item. All in favor? Opposed? It's Councillor O'Neill and myself are opposed. The motion carries. Our first item is now shark fins.
Just one moment, Your Worship.
Or after presentations.
No, the motion was...
No, my motion was to move it up the agenda, Your Worship.
Okay.
Yeah, perhaps we proceed with the presentation as we have.
That would have been fine. He moved it before the... So that's fine. So we'll do the presentation first.
The first item this evening is our presentation from Mr. Mike Curry, who's the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies of British Columbia. He's here to present an award of excellence to the City of Coquitlam for the Partington Creek Integrated Watershed Management Plan. I'd like to invite him to come forward.
Thank you very much, Your Worship and Council. It's my great privilege to represent the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies here this evening. You may know us by our previous name, the Consulting Engineers of BC, or CEBC. We've recently undergone a name change. Our association represents the consulting engineering companies in British Columbia. We have an annual awards gala every year. All of our member firms submit projects that they believe are worthy of recognition, and an independent judging panel decides who the best of the best is. This year, our member firm, Curwood Lytle Associates, decided to enter the Partington Creek Stormwater Management Project on behalf of the City of Coquitlam with support of city staff into the awards competition. I'm pleased to announce tonight, if you haven't already heard the great news, that the project won an award of excellence at the awards gala. These are hotly competed prizes at the awards gala every year, and it's a great privilege to be able to win. The category that it was entered in was the soft engineering category, which is for studies and computer developments and things like that. And the reason why the Partington Creek project is recognized for the award is the recognition that development of a city center in an environmentally sensitive area needed some planning and stormwater management measures in order to take care of the environment and best serve the community. And the city was incredibly cooperative and responsive in working with the agencies and the engineering team in getting the project done. So on behalf of the association, I'd like to thank the city and congratulate you for a great project. I also happen to be the president of Curwood Lytle Associates, who was your engineers on the project, and I'd like to say thank you for being a great client on the project. And I'd like to acknowledge a couple gentlemen behind me, Bill Suzak and Dana Singh, who were also present at the awards gala that evening. So thank you very much. Is there an opportunity perhaps to get a photo with the staff?
With anyone in particular?
And the mayor?
Okay, okay.
Perhaps?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for bringing that to us, and thank you to staff for their role in this award-winning work.
Nice. Beautiful.
Mr.
Thank
Burke.
you, Your Worship. Following the resolution of Council to amend the order of the agenda, our next item is item 16, which is a notice of motion concerning a ban on shark fins. The recommendation is that Council give consideration to the following notice of motion presented by Councillor Reid and seconded by Councillor Sikora at the May 7th, 2012 regular Council meeting, that the City of Coquitlam implement a ban on the possession, trade, sale, and distribution of shark fins or their derivative products, and the staff provide a report on how to proceed with such an initiative, especially focusing on the issue of compliance. As per our procedure bylaw, the mover of the motion, Councillor Reid, has the option to speak first.
Thank you. May I go ahead, Your Worship?
Yeah?
Thank you. So this is kind of important to me, not that anybody is wondering why. I guess it's not a furry little animal, but it's still another species on this planet that I think we should have some respect for. Internationally, a consensus is building on the cruel and unsustainable nature of shark finning, with the sale of shark fin and or the practice of finning at sea already banned in a number of jurisdictions, including Chile, Ecuador, Honduras, and Bahamas. In the United States, Hawaii, California, Washington, Oregon, and Guam have all passed legislation banning the practice. Shark finning is illegal in Canada. Brantford, Ontario was the first municipality to ban shark fins, and a ban has been passed in Mississauga, Pickering, London, and Oakville, Newmarket, and Toronto, and lately Port Moody, which I believe is the first city in British Columbia to do so. They have a little bit of an ocean too. I guess we sort of share their foreshore because I believe that this is really an important issue. The reason, I mean, I could go on and on for hours on reasons why other than the intolerable cruelty, but there's no real reason for it. We have a planet that yesterday on Mother's Day, I think everybody realizes that we have a planet to leave to our grandchildren. And part of the planet is the ocean, and part of the ocean is how it's sustained with all the different species that Mother Nature put on the planet. And I have moved this, that the City of Coquitlam implement a ban on the possession, trade, sale, and distribution of shark fins or their derivative products, and that staff provide a report on how to proceed with such an initiative, especially focusing on the issue of compliance. Each of these cities have different ways of complying with the ban, and I wanted our staff to come up with one that would be suitable for our city. Some are placing fines, some are taking business licenses back. There's various ways that we can use for compliance and urging compliance, but I've heard little comments, snide little remarks that this is sort of a left-right thing. The left wing wants to do these things and the right wing doesn't. There's no wings here. This is just a straight issue on cruelty, and to take some species and cut off the fins and throw it back into the water and allow it to just die a horrible death, that's intolerable. I think all of these things went out a century ago. I don't think we need to deal in such barbaric practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much. This is a serious issue. It's been raised by Councillor Donnelly at the federal level, asking for a Canada-wide ban.
MP now.
An MP, sorry. Keep on forgetting that part. For the federal government and the New Democratic Party. And it's there before, and I hopefully that Canada itself will impose the ban on it. But at the local level here, I don't know of any restaurants in Coquitlam that actually serve shark fin soup. Secondly, the City of Vancouver had this before, and they didn't move forward with the ban. And you have a very large Chinatown area and a city with a lot of restaurants. We also have a country of China, which is 1.3 billion people that are using this as a food source and a delicacy in their culture. I think what we need to do, rather than going from city to city, should be protests outside Chinese embassies to change their attitude, because they are the huge consumers of this barbaric practice that's going on. Here in Coquitlam, we're going to ban it, but we won't make much of a dent in the worldwide catch and slaughter of sharks for their fins. It may be a symbolic gesture, and if that's all it is. But I think this is better, and I think, as was in the speaker before me mentioned, that this has been banned by federal governments, provincial governments in different countries around the world. That's where the ban is really going to be effective, and that pressure should come from those levels of governments to other governments to end this practice. I think if you're going to harvest any type of animal, you should use the full animal for all its pieces and parts and for its value, not to cut off one piece and send it into the ocean. I think that's a terrible, disgusting thing. We do have an issue, more than shark fins, is overfishing our waters around the world for human consumption, and that's a big issue. So this is going to pass. This motion, I don't think, will fail. I don't think it's the most effective way of doing this. I think it's more effective at the federal, provincial level, and especially, I think, if people are serious, I think this has to be brought to where the consumption is the greatest. And China's 1.3 billion and the other Asian countries, they are the area where this is consumed at the greatest amount. And pressure should be better on them to change and stop their way of doing this. And I think that should be a direct result. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora, you fell off the speaker's list.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, you're not. Sorry, you were next, but you pulled yourself off the speaker's
Go
list.
ahead. You can put everybody else in front of me. That's fine. Go ahead.
No, but we delayed. We actually moved this agenda up for. Okay, that's fine. He wants to speak last. So, Councillor Reamer.
Thank you very much. Well, I too will most likely support a shark fin ban. This issue came to my attention about 6 months ago when I was contacted by a citizen asking me if the city had jurisdiction to act. And I did check with our staff at the time, and yes, we do have the jurisdiction to act. I, at that time, also did some research into the Vancouver situation. And there is a lady in Vancouver by the name of Claudia Lai who does great advocacy work and runs an organization called Shark Truth. She has brought this to Vancouver, and as Councillor Asmussen said, Mayor Robertson declined to deal with it at that particular time. One, because it is more effectively dealt with at the federal level. And the second is it had great potential, I believe, to impact Vancouver on an even greater basis in that the shark fins are used for shark fin soup in several Chinese restaurants. So I did speak with a councillor up at the LMLGA about this, who is kind of waiting to hear if the community is ready. She would be willing to take that motion back to Vancouver. One of the items that I don't have any information on right now is the impact on our community that this particular ban would have. We need to know how to proceed with such an initiative, and as Councillor Reid specified in her motion, she wants a focus to be on the issue of compliance. I would also like to know what effect such a municipal ban has on the international problem of animal cruelty prior to creation of a bylaw and prior to us voting on it. And so I was wondering if I could make an amendment to Councillor Reid's motion And I don't know whether it would be considered friendly or not, but the amendment would be that the City of Coquitlam consider the implementation of a ban on the possession, trade, sale, and distribution of shark fins or their derivative products, and that staff report back with information on how to proceed with such an initiative, the issue of compliance, and the effect of such a municipal ban on the international problem of animal cruelty prior to creation of or voting on such a bylaw. I would really like to have a staff report in front of me before I make my final decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's an amendment I'm making.
Motion is to amend.
I'll second that.
Okay. Seconder. Could we, I'm sorry, the relevant portions that were changed are what?
The basic change is that we don't vote on this until we receive a staff report with the information regarding the issue of compliance, how to proceed with such an initiative, and the effect of such a municipal ban on the international problem.
Okay. So we'll have to suspend this queue. We'll go to a new queue if you want to speak to the amendment. On the amendment, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't support that amendment. It brings a considerable level of lots more language and no more direction. The motion as it stands in front of us calls for us to decide to implement a ban. Locally, that's all we can do. And then asks that staff provide a report on how to proceed. It's implicit that staff will have to bring us back a report. They'll have to bring us back a bylaw. We'll have all that to go through. The issue of compliance is the largest issue for us to deal with. So the motion before us presents, I was going to say the moral question, but it's more than a moral question. There's the issue of animal cruelty. There's also the issue that Councillor Asmundson raised when I thought he was speaking in favor, was that, yes, we all use, or not all of us, but many of us use animals. I have leather shoes, I eat meat, I do all that stuff. But we use all or almost all of the animal. We don't waste. And that's a real moral sin, in my view, in the shark fin practice. And I'm sorry, I'm going away from debating the amendment. So I will stop and say that simply that I can't support the amendment. I believe the motion as it stands accomplishes the objective. Thank you.
And I was determined not to interrupt you, even though you were straying quite a bit. Councillor O'Neill on the amendment.
Yes, I support that because the way the motion is worded right now seems to be asking us to shoot first and ask questions later. We're going to implement a ban. But then we're going to ask staff on how we should proceed with that ban and how we'd get compliance. Shouldn't we know that information first? It seems to me this is a little backwards, that we really should know if such a ban can be initiated and if there's any way of getting compliance, and then we should be able to say, okay, well, if that's the case, then we can proceed with this. But it just seems to be a little backwards to me, so that's why I supported it. The deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I'm not going to support the amendment. I do think actually we have to give direction to staff. And if we, as a council, decide to go ahead with the ban, then staff will come up with some suggestions for how to best implement and get compliance. This isn't brand new. There have been, Councillor Reid listed off a whole bunch of other municipalities who have done it. So it's not completely novel territory. And I think that we need to make a decision first, and then we'll get details on how to best proceed. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. Had I known that there would have been so much skating around this issue, I would have asked the meeting to be held in a skating rink and brought my skates along. But I didn't. To me, the amendment doesn't accomplish what the notice of motion is supposed to accomplish. So I'll speak to the notice of motion when it comes forward. So, but I'll not be supporting the amendment.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
Thank you. The reason it was written this way is that I wanted council to go to staff with a definitive decision, either we are or we are not. The reason I did not say that after sale and distribution of shark fins or the derivative, I could have said that there would be a $500 fine like some cities have done. I could have said we would withdraw their business license as some other cities have done. There's all kinds of things. And I thought that it was fairer to have staff come back with what a consequence could be, and that's why it is written in that way. But we are actually going to staff saying we have made the decision to do this, and whatever compliancy issue that they could bring forward is where we would go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
I guess my only one concern with this, and like I said, is the fact that we're just going to have a town hall meeting tomorrow night because we made a decision on something that we decided we're going to need more information on. And so we acted first, and now we're pulling back and saying, well, now let's get the information, let's look at it and do a better decision. So, you know, are we going down the same street? We're saying we know the answer here, but I think what the other councillors are saying is that they just would like more information. It came to some of the new councillors early on in their mandate when they said they'd like to have more information on it before they make a decision. I don't think anybody's saying they're not going to support a possible ban, but they're asking for better and more information to be provided before. And you know, Mayor Stewart, I don't know if there was a previous practice of supposing, because we used to have a 2-week break, now we're having a 1-week break between council meeting and notice of motions. And there used to be a staff where there was a requirement at one time, I thought, to have a staff report on a notice of motion to give background to it. Is that still, or do we drop that?
Mr. Clerk.
I can only report on the practice since my arrival, and this has been the practice. I think one of the reasons for that was that council did not want staff to undertake a lot of work for items that they were not ultimately going to support. So I think the direction was to get council's agreement around the issue and direction to staff to proceed, and then a report would follow. So. Okay,
because it used to be that at one point we were asking for in the notice of motion for a background report at that time. I think that's what these two councillors are wishing that had been part of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I had almost exactly the same example of bow hunting. I think sometimes we do tend to, in this case, for example, the motion is that we ban it, and that we, as Councillor O'Neill said, we ask some questions of staff later as to whether that's viable, whether that's how we can enforce it. I'm troubled by the wording here. At the same time, I'm absolutely troubled by the, no offense, but by the amendment. The amendment implies that we should have some of our staff, I'm not sure which ones, maybe it's Mr. McIntyre, develop a report on shark fins and the enforcement thereof. Because it's so far out of the realm of what the rest of our business is about tonight. So I'm struggling with that. So and I recognize that the intention is let's get enough information so that we can make this decision if we're going to make a decision. So I'm going to support that, but at the same time, only because it does seem like council is heading down a path to do something that is kind of outside of our realm. And Councillor Reamer is asked for a second time.
Well, I'm happy to amend the amendment if it doesn't say exactly.
No, I wasn't concerned about the wording of it. I'm concerned only that we're going to probably spend an hour on an agenda item that wasn't. Okay. So the motion is to amend. And no further speakers. All in favor of the amendment? All opposed to the amendment? I've got Councillors Hodge, Nicholson, Reid, Sikora, Robinson are opposed. The motion fails. Back to the Q1. Councillors.
Oh, sorry, I have not activated the other queue yet. So there we go. So the last speaker was
pulling
Councillor.
yourself off the speaking list? Okay, good. So Councillor Reamer was the amendment. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Well, This is, I think, ties up on a whole number of issues. One is certainly the moral one that we've heard around animal cruelty. The other one, and I really appreciate Councillor Asmundson speaking to not using the whole animal, recognizing that this is another life and all we're doing is taking a small portion of it and destroying an animal. The other issue that I anticipate is going to come up is whether or not this is our jurisdiction in terms of argument and for us to decide, and I think it's been clear other municipalities have done it, and we actually do have the authority to ban these kinds of items. And the other question is about sort of internationally, what's the influence? How can our little tiny community of 125,000 people have impact? And what comes to me is the phrase "be the change you want to be." And it's that whole me to we messaging that the Kyleberger brothers have embarked on. And they are really clear in their message that it just starts with you. It starts with one person. And we are collectively 9 people representing 120,000. And I think that's pretty powerful when there's an issue that is coming up all over the world. Our young people are speaking out against it. They are appalled at the practice, recognizing that China has 1.3 billion people, and that's a very large population. And the only thing we can do is to try to influence. And I think we have that obligation as individuals and collectively as a council. So I appreciate Councillor Reid bringing this up, and I appreciate our Member of Parliament Fig Donnelly bringing it up and taking it on, because it is a federal issue, but I think it's important that we support good decision making at that level, and I'm prepared to support that as a council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My turn has come up. The motion is to implement a ban on the possession, trade, sale, and distribution of shark fins. The motion is intended to prevent shark finning. And we all agree, I think, around the table that that's a cruel practice, absolutely despicable. But at the same time, can we respond to that by banning, well, first of all, can we ban the possession? Is there a staff person that says that a truck that's driving from the port in Vancouver through Abbotsford could be stopped and its goods seized because we have banned the possession of shark fins in Coquitlam? Anybody? Sorry. Is there any? Mr. Dumont? Can we ban the possession?
I really don't know the answer to that question. I haven't come across this one before. I suspect that'd be a very difficult thing for us to enforce, of course.
Okay. Can we ban the trade? Can we stop the international trade of shark fins? Or local trade. Or local trade. It doesn't say that, it says trade. Mr. Dumont.
I think that our attempt at this will be more symbolic in nature than being effective in terms of banning the trade. Can we ban the distribution of shark fins? Can we even ban the sale? We know we can't ban the sale of pesticides. And so we're going to pass a bylaw now to ban the sale of another product that is legal in Canada and that doesn't cause harm to humans. Can we ban the sale of shark fins, souped or not? Okay, I know where we're going here. I'm looking down the list of things. I Googled animal cruelty and came up with fish farming and feather clipping and electric fences and branding and pigeon racing, drift net fish. Can we ban fish caught by drift net? Can we ban cosmetics from being sold in Coquitlam if they're animal tested? Can we ban the sale of battery hens or their eggs? Can we ban ultrafine wool? I mean, we could have a collection of notices of motion, all of which are intended and may well do their little bit of being the change, and we may advance them to the beginning of the agenda.
of every council meeting, and we could have an hour's debate on whether or not each one of those is a valid thing that we can do, but it's not our role. The people of Coquitlam didn't ask any questions about this at the all candidates meetings, and it wasn't in any of our brochures, and I'm not certain how we thought we had the mandate. We may have the ability. We actually, it doesn't sound like we do have the ability, but we may have I don't think we have the moral authority to do it, and while I won't eat shark fin soup, I have actually eaten shark. So I know that banning the sale of shark fins means that if the world did that, the world would still catch shark for food. I guess they wouldn't be able to sell the fins, but it wouldn't make much sense. So I'm troubled by the direction we're heading in here. We have the notices of motion that relate to the work that we are allowed to do, and the work, in fact, that we are elected to do. I'm fine with those, but the notices of motion that come forward to ban nuclear power from China, they're going to be troubling, and I'm not going to be able to support these kinds of notices of motion. I nonetheless will speak against finning. I won't vote in favor of a ban that we can't affect and that is only symbolic in any case. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. You said that very well. After this notice of motion came forward, I had already started a file on the issue and was beginning to educate myself on the issue anyway. And the notice of motion came forward, and I did more research. And as a matter of fact, I realized at the end of the weekend, before we started our council proceedings today, that I spent more time on this issue than on any of the other issues that we had to deal with today. And I actually think it's the least important of the issues that we are elected to do. And that is not saying that the shark finning is not something that's abhorrent, because it is. It's every human's moral responsibility to be a good steward of the environment, to make good use of natural resources, to steward them. And this is not when you're killing a beast of several hundred pounds and just taking the fins. That's a horrible waste, and there's cruelty involved, and it should be a practice that is stopped. I note that when last fall, when former councillor Finn Donnelly went public with this action, he launched a petition. The petition didn't urge Coquitlam Council to ban the sale, trade, or distribution of shark fins. It didn't urge the provincial government to do this either. It urged the federal government to ban the importation of shark fins to Canada, and that's the proper place for this. I would have been much happier, and I would have supported in a minute a motion from Councillor Reid and seconded by Councillor Sikora to add our voice to Finn Donnelly's call to ban the importation, to call for the federal government to ban the importation of shark fins to Canada, because it's for the reasons I spoke. It's wasteful, it's immoral, it's animal cruelty. But instead, what we have here with this motion, we complain about governments downloading stuff on us. And as a matter of fact, it's going to be a theme that the Mayor's Council is going to be looking at, is all the extra costs that the municipalities are having to shoulder because of downloaded responsibilities. Well, this isn't downloading. This is the exact opposite. This is something that I call up-grabbing. We're actually wanting to take more responsibilities on our shoulder. It's not really our bailiwick. Up-grabbing, not downloading. Thank you. I'm glad you liked that one. And I've heard Councillor Reid complain many times about downloading and wanting new sources of income, to new ways of taxing the people in order to make ends meet at the municipal level. Well, I think we should start by, if this is a real concern, let's not get into stuff like this. It is bound to cost us money, one way or the other. If we are serious about this, somehow we're going to have to try to enforce it. Somehow we're going to have to try to find compliance, and that is going to cost us money. So let's not complain about downloading when we're up grabbing. I'm also concerned that with the defeat of this motion, the amendment from my colleague, that we're going ahead really on blind faith at this stage, that we don't know if it can be implemented, it can be forced compliance. We have no staff report on this, and that's just a side issue. The bigger issue, again, is this going into a realm that we are not elected to go into. The mayor listed a variety of subjects under animal cruelty, any one of which could now come before council from any one of us, say, okay, well, this is our latest issue that we're deeply morally concerned about. It's wasteful, it's horrible, and we're not going to allow any of this in Coquitlam. But there's a raft of other social issues. I didn't Google animal cruelty issues. I Googled international boycotts over the weekend, and looked at all the international boycotts that are out there. Now, are we going to start bringing these forward one after another, week after week, to get on board with this international boycott or another, about cruelly treated farmers in Nigeria, about exploited miners in South Africa, about child labor in developing nations, even about how maybe we should ban all Apple iPods, iPads, iPhones, because there's tremendous controversy about working conditions and harsh labor practices in Chinese plants. Hardly a week goes by when I don't hear about the concerns about the Foxconn plant, and there are people who will not buy Apple because of these working conditions. Is that going to be the next thing coming before us next week? There's been an ongoing campaign against Nestle. Because this has been going on for decades, because of they supply thank you. They make milk powder, and that displaces natural baby milk. Okay, no more Nestle products in Coquitlam? Is that going to be the next motion? One after another, after another, after another. Where are we going here? And I've got a long list of these things, and I won't go through them all. But that just shows you some of what we're going to, what we're leading to if we start getting into this and we pass this motion. So if we pass this motion, we will be encouraging this sort of action, and I would like to discourage that. The mayor mentioned that none of us had this in our advertising campaigns or booklets during the last campaign, and that is correct. As a matter of fact, I actually had something in there that said that I wanted council to stick to local business, so I had the opposite. So if I voted in favor of this motion, I would be turning my back on my pledge in the last election, so I can't do that. Again, none of this is to say that the practice of shark finning is horrendous. Is not horrendous, because it is. One last point on this. Another thing that we could do, besides supporting Finn Donnelly in his campaign to urge Ottawa to ban the importation, is to at the same time support a campaign, let's say, to have international certification of shark fins that are actually part of the culling of sharks, where the sharks are not cruelly killed, where all the shark meat is used. Surely then we would allow the shark fins in Coquitlam at that stage, same as if using the entire cow for all the beef products that we use. If the shark is used responsibly, then there's no reason the shark fins can't be used, correct? So that's another shortcoming of this notice here. So I definitely will not be supporting this, even though I will be speaking against, and I have been speaking against the practice of finning and just taking those fins off the sharks and then wasting the shark and being unduly and being cruel to the animal as well. It's an immoral practice. Thank you.
Thank you. All the speakers on the on this side of the table. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. You know, I'm glad we brought it up this time because I do have to leave for the airport, but I'll tell you, if it is another about half an hour, I'd have to walk out anyway. So I'm glad Councillor O'Neill got finished with his speech. But, you know, when we're talking about election campaigns, and I don't know what this is all about, that somehow everything that you're going to do in the next 3 years should have been in your election campaign. Well, you can take a look at my brochure, and I practice what I had in my brochure. And all candidates meeting, I practice what I promised the people. For instance, and I don't want to get under the mayor's skin, but the mayor on all candidates meeting said, I'm going for zero increase in taxes. Zero increase in taxes. Did it happen? No, because he changed his mind. So the politicians have a right to change their mind, you know, as I do or anybody else, see? But the fact is, you know, I remember 2 or 3 years ago, I was putting out a fundraiser for the Adjournment. And it was a set dinner, and guess what? The restaurant operator thought he'd do a big deal for us and put shark fin soup. Well, the first thing that came to my mind, they may not like it. Sure enough, when I went to the Adjournment, they said, take that shark fin soup off of there. Otherwise, we're just not going to have that dinner there. See, so, you know, even the Adjournment recognize that. The fact is that, you know what? I got a business in Richmond. My partner is an Asian guy, okay? And we go and have lunch every time I can get to Richmond to my office there. And we go to different restaurants. And I can tell you, you'd be surprised how many Asian restaurants don't have shark fin soup on their menu. You'd be surprised how many of them that don't have it. I've only come across one so far. So, you know, those things do happen. But to me, I think this is a great thing for us to do. I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, to somehow say that it's not our right or we shouldn't be able to do it and that type of deal, and there should be some fines or something like that, you know. First of all, how do you enforce it? Very simple. How do you enforce it? You got a shark fin soup on your menu. That's how you enforce it. That's all there's to it. It's very, very simple. You enforce it that way. The fact is that it's illegal and that's it, and you can't have it, you know. So those are the things that happen. But and we can mix it in with pesticide, we can mix in and talk about a whole lot of things. But really, frankly, I think it's the right thing to do. You cut off the fins of a shark and let him go. He goes to the bottom of the ocean, and that's the end of him or her, or whatever it may be. And, you know, to me, I think it's cruel, it's bad, and to me, I think that that's one that I can support. And you know what? I got an awful lot of Asian friends, an awful lot of Asian friends. And I'll tell you, I don't think that they're going to come after me and say, Sikora, you did the wrong thing, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we wouldn't have lunch with you anymore or dinner with you anymore or we even talk to you anymore. I don't think that that's the case at all. They've been banned. It's been banned across many, many countries. And there's no reason why we can't do it. Thank you.
Not a country, but Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, in my attempt to respond to absolutely everybody around the table, in a really unfortunate choice of phrase, I have a complete bouillabaisse of comments to make.
I get it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we're going to take stock. Sorry.
And in no particular order. We all have aphorisms that we try to live by, and sometimes they become kind of trite. I think this is a real example of the need to think globally and act locally. I can't impact the Parliament of Canada. Just an occasional letter to my MP who actually writes back. But I can have an impact here in Coquitlam, and that's what I'm elected to do. And I'm elected to deal with issues as they arise, whether they were contemplated when I wrote my brochure or not. There's a suggestion that we're going blindly ahead with something that we don't even know we can do. Well, I'm sorry, but I have to believe that if Pickering can do it, and Waterloo can do it, and surely to goodness we have every bit as much power as Toronto, then we can do this. And we should. Can we ban the trade? Can we ban the sale? Can we ban the distribution? We can damn well try, and we have to. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Well, I guess Councillor Nicholson said it very well. I guess we can damn well try and we have to. But I have to say, in all the years I have been here, I have never had such condescending and rude remarks from a mayor. I found what you had to say and treating this so, I guess, trite is probably the word. I just find it terrible. We have dealt with the pesticide bylaw, and Brent, I'll go to you. There's been several other bylaws that were not in our direct jurisdiction over the years that we've dealt with. So this wouldn't be the first non-totally Coquitlam issue that we've ever dealt with. I think it's an important one, and I'm going to stand by it.
Well, you've mentioned me. My apologies if you took my comments other than simply a comment on the public policy question. I didn't mean to make the issue trite. I certainly said the issue is a big one and that I'm absolutely opposed to finning. So I support you entirely on the issue. I just don't think we can do it. So, Councillor Hodge.
Okay. And I'm troubled by this one because, and I do, to an extent, appreciate that, is this what we were elected to do? But at the same time, I think that, we have a chance that we have an opportunity here that we can make a difference. And maybe, that we have to, everybody around this table has said the same thing, that this is a terrible practice and nobody wants to see it continue and that we all think it should stop. And we have a chance to make it stop. And we can do this one person at a time, one councillor at a time, one city at a time, one province at a time, and then maybe we can do this one country at a time and we can get this practice stopped. And, and I heard Councillor O'Neill said it should be stopped. And the way to stop this is by one citizen at a time. I also heard Councillor O'Neill say that he also wants to ban iPods, and I don't know if he's going to be making a motion to that effect, and I don't know that I would support that motion, but I do realize that you have to draw a line at how far this continue. But this is a practice that we can make a difference on. And Councillor Reamer said that we have the legal jurisdiction to do it. Well, I think not only do we have the legal jurisdiction to do this, I think we have the moral obligation to do this as well. And and I can't. Even to go home and see my kids and tell them that I didn't try to do something to stop this. I think we all have an obligation to do what we can. And I think we can debate whether it's a federal issue or a provincial issue, but I don't think there's anybody who agrees that this is a practice that should be allowed. And we have a chance to try and make a difference here. And I actually, by the way, I did have somebody raise it during the election on a doorstep, and I did say that it's a terrible practice and that I would do what I could to try and stop it. And I think that we should also take this beyond the city. I hope that this does pass tonight. I hope if it does, I think we don't stop with this city. That maybe we do, as Councillor Neal suggested, that that we do write a letter to the powers that be, to the feds, and bring this forward as well, because we can do this, we can make a statement, hopefully we can make a difference, but I think there's a lot of citizens in this country that all agree with everybody around this table that this is a practice that has to be stopped. Thank you.
Okay. Actually, I can't move an amendment. I'm contemplating. It's a practice that has to be stopped. I think there's agreement around the table. Can we make a motion that talks about the practice a little bit rather than the product? There are certified, and someone mentions the existence of products that I don't know. I guess
on a point of order, Mayor, certainly you can make a motion if you want to stop off the chair and have an acting mayor take over.
I do.
You can certainly make a motion.
I know the rules.
Okay, well, I thought I'd remind you because you said you couldn't make a motion.
Well, I can't from the chair. You know that. Thank you. Councillor, that wasn't the modus of motion. Councillor Reamer.
Well, I was going to add something to Councillor Reid's motion, and that is that we send a letter to the federal government about the practice of shark finning and requesting that they
Question on the motion, please.
we're having a discussion.
I call a question on the motion.
You can call, but we don't have a procedure for that, as you know.
So did you?
There isn't a motion to close debate in our
Yeah, it is, but
procedures.
then can we vote separately on them?
Yeah, you just asked to move to divide.
Okay,
So
okay.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay.
Anybody wants to read a province paper?
I beg your pardon? Okay. He was trying to be funny. Okay. The motion to amend is to add a letter to the federal government encouraging action to ban.
Shark fins.
That shark fin.
We assume at that point. That's the motion.
Shark fins.
And I move to separate?
They'll be separated, actually. Is there a seconder?
I'll second
Okay. The motion is to amend is to write to the federal government. On the motion to amend, Councillor Reamer?
Yes.
I wasn't. I assumed you supported it because you moved it. Do you have any? Did you have anything to say on it?
No.
Okay.
Other than the fact, we've all talked about the fact that this would be more effectively dealt with at the federal level, and we all feel that the practice is abhorrent, and it would. So we need to send this letter. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I'd like to be clear as to where we are here. Councillor Reamer's amendment is to add to the motion.
It's part 2 of the motion. Councillor Reed's.
Which we may vote on separately.
Right, correct.
I can tell you that what I have here is a notice of motion for later in the meeting in response to Councillor O'Neill, saying that we should write to the leaders of each federal party asking them to lead their parties in support of the member for New West Coquitlam's petition to ban trade in shark fins. So one or the other.
I think it's very relevant to have it with a motion. And in fact, when I was discussing this issue with Port Moody Council the other evening, I said to them, well, did you also pass a motion to send this letter? So I think it would be, I'd like to see it with a motion.
You and I are doing very nicely here without the intervention of the mayor.
We'll get everything figured out.
That's right.
The rule of the chair rules that the notice of motion wouldn't be required. It would be a motion because the issue of shark fins, whether it belongs on the agenda or not, is on the agenda. And so the motion is still to amend. There was a seconder. It was seconded. Councillor Nicholson, are you done?
If I could hear the language of the part 2 of the motion, I believe I would find myself in support.
Adding action number 2 is?
That Coquitlam Council send a letter to the federal government requesting a ban on the import of shark fins.
Copied to other parties.
And copied to other parties.
No, it's separate.
Other political parties.
And CC'd also to our Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
Okay. Is that the motion that someone seconded?
I think she's got it.
Yes.
That is the motion that Selena seconded?
And to be voted separately.
The rule we've adopted is if anyone asks for separation, we separate.
Thank you.
Councillor Nicholson, you're done?
I'm done, thank you.
Councillor Segura on the amendment.
No, I got mixed feelings about that one. There's a notice of motion served. It was seconded. Now we're trying to dilute it. I mean, no, hold it. Let me have the floor, please.
Councillor Segura's got the floor.
You know, the fact is that, you know what, if you really mean what you want to, outside of to stall or do something else, then make a motion after you voted on the original motion to send a letter to the federal government. You then may have 100% support on that. But to somehow dilute our notice of motion, I'm not going to support it. I'm sorry.
Councillor Segura, it leaves the notice of motion completely untouched and adds an extra action in that it would then have us write to the federal government and ask them to do it too.
Yeah, no, our motion.
You're in favor of it, I believe. Okay. Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. I will support the amendment. I believe it's something that we can do. It's something that is appropriate, and I may even not oppose. I won't support, but I might not oppose the original motion. But I mean, this is getting silly. We're an hour into this. Okay. On the amendment, those who are in favor, all those who are opposed, that motion carries. Who's opposed to writing? Yes. Okay. Okay. The motion carries. Now, oddly enough, we'll be dividing the two and voting on that one again. Well, I'm not going to vote on that one again. Consider that one having been passed. You're okay? No, you're going to make me vote. Okay. On part one, the original motion, which is to implement a ban on the possession, trade, sale, and distribution of shark fins and the derivative products, and providing a report on compliance issues and such. All in favor? All those opposed? Councillor O'Neill is opposed. That motion carries. On the second part is the writing to the federal government and various other parties. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Sikora is in favor of that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's done properly. You know, you can laugh as much. On. And what is it with you? Why do you want to have to take me on every meeting?
My apologies, Councillor Sikora.
Well, you have to more than apologize. You should step down from the chair if you want to debate anything. You know the rules.
I'm not debating, Councillor Sikora.
No, you're just making a fool out of yourself.
Okay. My apologies. Out of deference to your years on council, I will go no further. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next item 2, is the minutes of the Town Hall meeting held Saturday, April 28th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, May 7th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
I didn't hear the movers. My apologies. Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is recommendations from the Council and Committee meeting held Monday, May 7th. The Council and Committee meeting put forward a recommendation concerning my Coquitlam, and it was that Council forward a letter to the provincial government requesting that the community charter be amended to allow for the delivery of tax notices in electronic form only, e-billing, where so requested by the property owner.
Moved by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Second recommendation arising out of that committee meeting concerns Suburban application number 6311 to the Passenger Transportation Board. The recommendation that staff be directed to report back to a future council and committee meeting with respect to Bel Air Taxi's application to the PTB, and to advise the PTB that council is reconsidering its initial position on the application.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is the minutes of the Riverview Lands Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, April 12th. The recommendation is that council receive these minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Recommendation arising out of that advisory committee's meeting concerns their 2012 work plan, and the recommendations that council approve the 2012 work plan as put before you in these 5 bullets.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is the minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, April 18th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Sorry. Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Nicholson. Sorry, Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is minutes of the Sustainability and Environmental Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, April 19th. Recognitions to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that advisory committee's meeting concerns their 2012 work plan. The recommendations that council approve the 2012 Sustainability and Environmental Advisory Committee work plan as set out before you in those 4 bullets.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8 is the minutes of the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting of Tuesday, May 1st. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Asmussen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9 is fourth and final reading of fees and charges bylaw, amending bylaw. This is for Sidewalk Cafe permits, and the recommendation that Council give fourth and final reading to fees and charges bylaw, amending bylaw, Sidewalk Cafe permits number 4313.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. If we could, oops, my apologies. Councillor Sikora is opposed. If we could pause for a moment here. Okay. I'm going to, my deep apologies. I'm going to apologize to Councillor Sikora. I chuckled at the end of the last vote, or several votes ago. I shouldn't have. Councillor Sikora has been on council a long time. He deserves our respect, and my apologies to him. I'm afraid I got caught in the moment, and my apologies to you. Thank you. Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 10 is a final reading to zoning amendment bylaw 4263/2011 and a associated development permit. This is the authorization for a 31-unit street-oriented townhouse development in northeast Coquitlam at 1239 Burke Mountain Street. The three-part recommendation is to require the owner of the proposed subdivision to provide 5% cash in lieu to address the provisions of the LGA, to give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4263/2011 and approve the signing and sealing of the associated development permit, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute it.
Okay, my apologies. Councillor Asmussen has pressed his button to speak before the reading of the motion.
Thank you very much. Due to perceived potential conflict, since this is close to the neighborhood where I live, I'll be excusing myself. And actually, if you could do item 12 also, I will need to excuse me, so those can be done together, or you can have me come in and out a couple of times.
That would be fine. We'll reorder to do 10 and 12 together. Councillor Asmussen excuses himself.
Move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
In order to accommodate Councillor Asmussen's absence, we'll move forward to item 12 on the agenda.
On that number 12 now.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, seconded by Councillor O'Neill.
Your Worship, if it is...
You want to read it first?
I would, just because it helps
That's
orient those who may be watching on the webcast and others as to what the item is about. So item 12 is a proposed lane cancellation application for lots adjacent to 3466 and 3472 Gislason Avenue. This is bylaw number 4312. The recommendation is that Council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4312 and direct that this bylaw be advertised in accordance with the requirements of the Community Charter.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Sikora. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We'll bring Councillor Asmussen back. Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Item 11 we're on. Move to item 11.
Item 11 is also a proposed road cancellation application, and this is for a portion of Delestre Avenue adjacent to 319 North Road. This is bylaw 4245. The recommendation is that Council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4245/2012 and direct that this bylaw be advertised in accordance with the Community Charter.
Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you. This piece of property is Coquitlam Morin, next to Coquitlam Morin, Mr. McIntyre.
Mr. McIntyre.
Your Worship, this is a portion of unutilized road allowance right on the south side of the Best Western Inn, just east of North Road.
So this the piece of property that Coquitlam Morin has been using for quite a number of years. Am I correct?
The Best Western has it finished off for a parking area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it hasn't been moved though yet.
It was moved.
Oh, my apologies. Councillor O'Neill moved it, seconded by Councillor Asmussen. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Moving now to item 13. Item 13 is a preliminary report on an OCP amendment bylaw. This is Bylaw 4310, and a rezoning bylaw, Bylaw 4311, to accommodate a high-rise mixed-use development 1123 Westwood. Recommendation to Council is that Council give first reading to City of Coquitlam Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 4310, first reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4311, and that these two bylaws be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Sikora. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, this is the, just last week we had a building application come forward, zoning for a development on Glen, and that resulted in I guess over a period of several years, of a parking variance of about 170 stalls. And so I see this one coming now on first reading, and once again I see a request for a parking variance. I think this time at 13%. And so I'm just wondering, you know, I'm really concerned. I understand that with SkyTrain coming, there's an anticipation that we may not need all the parking spaces in each of these developments. But I'm really concerned because I think that with SkyTrain coming, that we may actually see a need for more parking outside of these buildings. And I think that the town center area may actually see more a greater need for parking in the future, particularly when I look up towards Burke Mountain and I see 24,000 to 30,000 people moving in up there, many of whom are going to come down to use SkyTrain. They're going to bring their cars. And to me, this whole issue of parking in the town center, it's a little bit like our issue of parkland, that just because we don't need it in one neighborhood, we may need it in the next neighborhood. And I think that before we continue to give more variances on these buildings, we have to do an overall look at how much parking we're going to need in the whole town center area. And I've raised it before, and I think that we really have to look at some kind of a system like we do with parkland, where if it's park's not needed here, a developer puts cash up in lieu, and then we build the parking somewhere else. And I think that we're going to need parking in the town center, and I'm really concerned about this continuing of giving variances and reducing the total amount of parking in the town center, at least until we know what we're going to need. And my understanding is that we've got a parking strategy study that's coming forward in a few weeks that hopefully may address some of that. And I think that we should defer this until we see the parking strategy, until we can sort of get an overall concept. Because time's ticking away, SkyTrain is coming, land is being developed, and I think before I can support anything else that's going to require parking variances, that we have to look at the total parking situation in the town center area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm hoping that if we could get a land use plan for the city of Poco. When I see maps, you see, American maps, and then they've got this gray blob known somehow it's nameless and doesn't have anything, called Canada. We're doing the same thing with Poco, and given the relationship and the context, I'd really like to see their land use map come forward as well, so that we have a better context in which to make a decision. I have a whole bunch of questions about this project, and I appreciate Councillor Hodges' concerns about parking, but I haven't seen anything come forward around considering a car share program or a zip car space or something that sort of mitigates against some of those parking challenges. Sorry? They have a bike maintenance station, which I thought was great. I might just come on over and fix my bike there. But the idea is that I'd like to see something that sort of recognizes that to compensate for the variance. The other thing that I'm interested in is how far would this be from the Douglas College station, a proposed possible Lincoln station? Do we know the distance? I didn't notice it in the report. So, close can mean 600 meters. It could also mean 200 meters.
To the chair, I don't have the precise number of meters, but it is basically 2 short blocks. Westwood is 2 blocks east of Pine Tree.
So would that be a 400-meter? It's within the 400-meter catchment that we've been using for all of our decision making. So, given that it's within 400 meters, then really it sort of fits with our transit-oriented development catchment area. So, what disappoints me about this project is I haven't seen anything around accessible housing adaptable housing or accessible housing, which I've been asking for all the transit-oriented development projects. I also have a series of questions about I think it's the TransLink letter that I thought was interesting. There were, I think it's a TransLink, yes, a TransLink letter. And this is more for staff. It comments on the provision of wheelchair ramps to the street. And it gives us some feedback about that. Does that make sense? Am I in the right one? I think so. Yeah, it's at the very end of the package. On the very last page, it's February 22nd. It had some comments about how to make the roads accessible. Did you find it? The current proposal provides one wheelchair ramp at 45-degree angle, which can cause wheelchairs and strollers to be directed into traffic lanes. And I thought we had changed our standards so that we didn't do that anymore. And so if people are doing plans and we're approving them, I have some concerns about that.
Through the chair, that's a detail that has escaped my attention, but I will discuss that with staff, and we'll have that information ready if the bylaw goes to public hearing.
Great. And the one last question is the future of what I was just looking at all the concerns that people have brought forward, some of which I think it would be great to get addressed. Like people are concerned if there's development that their house will shake and will fall down, or if we develop anything that would be legitimate. But it would be I'd like to have an opportunity to perhaps the public hearing to help those residents understand that doesn't happen. But the future of Westwood Street, what's the future vision? Is it going to be widened at all, or is it going to stay narrow? Because I think it changes as it goes through the city, and it would be interesting to find out what the long-term vision is for Westwood.
So, Your Worship, I believe in the frontage on this property here would be for a 4-lane cross-section, but that's not continuous with the balance of Westwood. So let us confirm that what that cross-section is, recognizing that the Port Coquitlam municipal boundary is immediately south, so there's some
I get the
road system discontinuity there.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for raising the Westwood Street. I mean, it's been a frustration. We saw it widened, and I thought it was going to be 2 lanes, and it still stayed a single lane with left turn bays. It was not what I had hoped for in the widening of Westwood, but maybe there's still more to come. I think when we talk about parking, I have no problem with the parking variance for this building. I think we're talking about 2 different types of parking. This is parking for this building, the usage of this building, being close to a SkyTrain station, and I agree with Councillor Robinson's issue about ride-share cars being provided within. I think that's a necessary issue, and the universal accessibility issues in that for adaptive units. But people coming down from other areas looking for parking aren't going to be parking in private towers or buildings for their parking. We're looking at a different type of parking that we need to provide, and I think we have discussed that issue, and I thank you for bringing it up, Councillor Hodge, about I think we've given direction to staff to look at bringing forward a fee for charging for development for that. We're not there yet, but that's going to be coming. I'm going to vote to send this to public hearing. We're going to hear what people say on public hearing. But on the parking variance, it's 13%. This could have been 30%. That's what they're allowed up to. So 13% is a fairly, I would say, minor parking variance for this type. And I think with a SkyTrain station potentially at Lincoln there in the future, or even at Douglas College, it's such a short walk that it makes sense for that parking variance to be in place on this unit here. The other issue I'd like to talk about is for the developer to make sure it has a energy efficiency use to it. I don't like the use of baseboard heaters. I'd like to see better uses of energy efficiency within buildings that are being constructed throughout Coquitlam. And I guess my other issue, and I'll say this again, is I'm looking for more of an iconic design, something rather than just a square building. I think we have a unique property here. I think there's different ways of making this building fit to the land shape a little bit, creating something unique and different on our skyline. I think if you look at our skyline right now, what's gone up, we're looking at fairly square box type of towers, not a lot of imagination. The skyline, I've said before in different developments, is the defines the look of our city and moving forward in the future. We're at the ground stage of this. And I think it's something, I think other councillors are feeling the same way, that we have to push for a greater design on these buildings. And that's what I'd like to see the developer go back and look at a more iconic, unique design. I'll say out in Surrey, land prices, that your pro forma is the same. There's a building with a wave with a curved, there's ways of doing it. They can do it in Surrey. I'm saying you can do it in Coquitlam. So I'll be moving this on to public hearing, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, before I get on to parking, which will be no surprise to anyone, I wanted to comment on the design, and Councillor Asmundson is dead on with his comments, but I wonder if I could refer to the site plan, Mr. McIntyre, and you have a round sort of rotunda thing there. Can you tell me, is that, and then I look at the rest and it's all square, so I'm wondering where the round piece fits in. Like if I look at the drawing, is that just a driveway or what is it? Is it attachment 5?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, that's the internal parking ramps. Okay. Because of the narrow, lengthy configuration of the site, it makes the parkade layout kind of difficult. And so the one way to get from one level to that is sort of a circular ramp system.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was supposed to be the ground of a building or whatever, but I agree the buildings are getting pretty boring. I wanted to talk about conversation I had with someone that lives not far from the SkyTrain station in Vancouver heading into the Broadway area. And one of the comments that was made, it's close to SkyTrain, and you know, you don't need 2 cars and you don't need this and you don't need that. And yes, says the owner. However, if anyone ever comes to visit you, they have to almost take SkyTrain to get to your house because there's absolutely no place to park. So they put visitor resident only parking in so that the residents could park on the streets with their little stickers. And then a high-rise building went in. And then there's another 100 people to occupy the same little streets, and they all now have 100 more cars with resident only stickers. So they can also all park on the street. And so SkyTrain is, I mean, it's a great thing, I guess, if it's coming, but it also comes with a lot of problems, and parking for current residents is one of them. So while 13%, not so bad, when they first came forward, they were 100, I believe, about 100 parking spaces short. So now we're down to 57 as a shortfall, so they've certainly come down, and I appreciate that. But that's this development, 57. And then we've got Windsor Gate coming on with, I can't remember how, and then we've just passed one on Westwood, not too far. So we're probably right now on what we decided was supposed to be even a minimum, we're probably even under that now. When you start adding all of these up, we don't have any parking. And so I keep harping about getting, if they're 57 spaces short, why don't they donate a portion of funds of those 57 parking spots to a parking spot right there close to Lincoln Station, which will be just as close within the 500 meters, and we can start building a parking lot for all those folks who need to park from Burke Mountain or Westwood Plateau or anywhere else and use the Lincoln Station. I'm not going to comment. I know Councillor Hodge's favorite project is a parking lot up at the park, where it could have double and triple dips for parking, which would be good. The other thing that I find that a little difficult, and I think we're trying it now, and I'd like your comment in C4, is the permitting the sharing of visitor and commercial parking during business hours. Well, the trouble with some of the businesses, if we're getting restaurants that are open at night, you know, that's when people are using visitor parking. So we're, you know, it just doesn't always work. So I guess what I'm saying to you is, if we're going to be shortfall parking, let's try and use that money to build up the parking that we're going to so desperately need for visitors, for our other citizens. The people that are going to occupy and pay taxes in Coquitlam aren't just the ones that live around SkyTrain and can walk. They're the people up on the hill that want to come down, and let's face it, bus service isn't great, and you might be able to run down the hill, but you're sure not going to drag 2 bags of groceries up, other than Selena. But I really think we need to look at this, and if we have a parking management study coming, I hope it addresses this.
Okay. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, it's parking, parking, parking. Well, I have a second issue with the parking. There's only 2 variances that are asked for here. One is in the number of parking spaces, but the one that actually bothers me more is 3 floors of parking above grade, where our practice is to allow 2. And one of the challenges, I think, for city councillors is our job is to try to help neighbours maintain good relationships and help them solve their problems. Well, the neighbours to the south are our neighbouring city and the people who live there, and it's the south wall of this development that's going to have 3 floors of parking staring into the backyard of somebody in Port Coquitlam. We've gotten more response, I think, on this at these early stages than we've seen typically. There's a lot of strong feeling about this development. I note in the report that the proponent has made changes to his plans. He's moved the building around, he's put some ivy over the, hope it's not that bad kind of ivy, on the parking structure and things like that. I believe in all these cases, the proponent, the developer, knows his business, knows what he's doing, knows what he wants to try and accomplish, and works with our staff to try to come up with the best solution. In this circumstance, I'm prepared to let him take the risk and go forward to public hearing. But it's going to be a very tough ride if we get the same kind of responses at the public hearing that we've seen so far, because our job is to listen to everybody, not just the developer. So I will support this going forward. I hope the developer will be taking a good hard look at what we see when we get to the public hearing. Thank you.
You done? Okay. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. Just a bit of information to start with. Councillor Robinson asked about the walking distance from this development to the SkyTrain station that would be at Douglas College, or the proposed somewhere in the future Lincoln Station. It's actually a 250-meter walk from the northeast corner of this development to Pine Tree. And any proposed Lincoln Station would be just across the street from Pine Tree. So it's pretty close. You're welcome. And on another traffic issue, certainly when people, the opposition that we're hearing both from the Port Coquitlam residents and the Coquitlam residents has to do with this big plunk of density all of a sudden appearing in a neighborhood where it hasn't been. And what do they mean what are they afraid of when they see this density, when they see the high rise? They're afraid of increased traffic. That's one of the big things. And I was really pleased to hear that there are some plans to deal with that, dealing with Westwood. Very important, because that was one of my concerns too. It's right, even now it's a terribly congested street, and definitely has to be upgraded. Now, another part of density would be, where all the people go, and this fits in quite nicely with another controversy that was before council several weeks ago, and this was the development of Glen Park, because Glen Park is just to the north of this. The forest across the street from this development, which is the south end of Glen Park, will be kept intact. North of that will be the existing playing field and improved, and then north of that will be the the forest that has been culled, mostly of dead and diseased, dying trees, and replaced with all sorts of new amenities. So the people that are coming to the area, there will be places for them to recreate, as it were. So that's another one of the issues that people are concerned about. Now, I believe I was the only council member who went to the public information, the open house on April 11th at the Evergreen Cultural Center that the developer staged. This open house followed by less than 2 weeks the controversy that was sparked by Port Coquitlam Council's unanimous condemnation of this project. I went there expecting to see pitchforks and torches as the people of Port Coquitlam came storming in to protest. And actually, there were very few members of the public. I think the developer actually always, at any given time, their staff there outnumbered the members of the public about 2 to 1. There were the concerns, as noted by in our report, that people are afraid of what this is going to mean. I guess the one thing that really no amount of our planning can deal with is the fact that we're going to have this goes through a 33-story building overlooking to the south, much smaller, townhouses at the most. So, and that's something we can't deal with if this goes ahead. I mean, it's into a neighborhood that's in Port Coquitlam, not Coquitlam, but. The facing part of the building, Councillor Nicholson talked about a 3-story parking lot facing, which is on the south face of the building, which will face across the street into Port Coquitlam. And certainly if I were a resident there looking into what I typically would imagine to be a parking lot, it wouldn't be a very pleasant sight. But the attachments that we have in our reports here, attachment, I guess it would be attachment 7, it's not labeled, oh no, it's part of attachment 6, because attachment 6 shows both the north face and the south face of the building. And the building elevation from the south actually shows something that doesn't look anything like a parking lot. Glassed in, or it looks like areas, and in between that is the walls, ivy-covered walls. There's some townhouses at the end, a smaller building at the other end. So that frontage isn't going to be quite as ugly as one might imagine. Certainly when I hear those, when I think of a 3-story parking lot, I think it'd be pretty ugly. So this doesn't look anything like that. So that's a good thing. So I think the developer has adjusted some of the plans. But it does come down to this 33-story building right in the middle of an area there, right north of an area. It's not part of Coquitlam, but right north of an area that didn't expect that, I guess, and doesn't want it. So I think it's a good development. It's something we've been picking away at it here for the last little while, and of course what we're not saying is what this is responding to. This is responding to tremendous market demand from the public, from all over the Lower Mainland, maybe all over Canada, because maybe all over the world. People love to live in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia. There's market demand for a variety of different sorts of housing styles, and this is one that provides lower cost housing, not low cost housing, of course, and gives people options to get a piece of property for themselves, to own something, and to start building up their nest egg through that ownership and starting their lives together as a young couple or something. So that's a positive here, and this is something we all talked about on the campaign trail, is affordable housing, and I certainly would see that this project is definitely in support of that. So I'll be happy to see this go forward to public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I don't have too much more to add. I do support this going forward to public hearing. We've already read a fair bit of feedback, and I think it's really important that we obtain as much feedback from the public as possible. So I am going to support it going to public hearing. I just want to address the parking variance for a moment. I don't favor deferring this until after we receive the transit parking strategy report, because we had a set of rules in place at the time we received the development application. I think we need to stick with the set of rules that were in place at that particular time. And then once the parking strategy comes forth, then we may have a new set of rules, and I think that that's only fair. With respect to the third level of parking above ground, that variance was necessary because of the water table problems. We couldn't stick it underground. Without that additional level of parking, of course, we would not have as much parking as we do. So I am going to support this going forward to public hearing, and thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. You know, I see nothing wrong with moving this to public hearing. Let's hear from the public what they have to say. I mean, we can go on to say that, A, we should have a parking lot across the way and somebody should contribute some money to the parking lot. Well, maybe he would have said, okay, here's $1 million towards the parking lot, but you get the $1 million lost for the property. Maybe there's some bargaining there. So, you know, those are things that you can't get both. And that piece of property has been sitting there for many, many years. As you know, we had land deals on it that collapsed and collapsed and collapsed because it's such a crazy piece of property that, frankly, if this doesn't go ahead, that piece of property will be there for 100 years and not be used. So I'm in favor of it going to public hearing, Mayor.
Thank you. And I'll echo that. This is a property that ought to be high density residential. It's too close to a proposed SkyTrain station to be anything else. But is this the right project? Well, I'd like to hear from the public on that one. But we also recognize fully that if our parking requirements are appropriate, some distance from SkyTrain, then they need to be lower. We have to relax them when we get close to SkyTrain, because it's absolutely ridiculous public policy, I think, to go forward with exactly the same standards for parking right next to a SkyTrain station. That's not something we should be doing. We should be speeding up the process of finding the right number. In the meantime, I think it's good public policy, and we've got I think a modest proposal here, a modest decrease in the parking or relaxation of the parking, and I'm comfortable with it, at least going to public hearing. So the question is, first reading and public hearing. All in favor? Opposed? After much debate, we are unanimous.
Item 14 pertains to the renewal of the Tri-Cities Early Childhood Development Community Accord. The three-part recommendations is that Council reaffirm their support for this accord as attached to the report, authorize the Mayor to sign the accord renewal annually on behalf of the City of Coquitlam until such time as Council may decide to revoke this authorization, and 3, reappoint Councillor Reamer to serve as the City's representative on the Development Committee and report back to Council on the work of the committee as need be.
Moved by Moved by Councillor Nicholson, second by Councillor Robinson, and responded to by Councillor Reamer. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 15 is a review of inspection fees. Recommendations that Council direct staff to bring forward bylaw changes in order to increase engineering inspection fees to cover direct inspection cost increases, which will come into effect at the beginning of next year.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Nicholson.
Just have a question, Your Worship. We talk here about to recover from developers. Are there other instances where engineering charges fees to the public? And is it contemplated to review those to bring them in line or to ensure that we're recovering costs? Thank you.
It's a rather broad question, Your Worship. The one that comes to my mind are the soil fees that have been sitting on some deputy or other minister's desk in Victoria for quite some time, and that is a big number. We have other fees that are quite minor, charging for maps and whatnot. But the two, I think the two major fees that we take are the soil fees and the inspection fees to pay for in-house. So those reviews, have been done. Like I say, we're a bit frustrated with the pace in Victoria to get that soil fee amendment completed. I'll let Mark comment on any other top-of-mind fees that he might think of.
Thank you, Your Worship. And we've just added some fees to do with some of the exemption permits that we do. Those are some other things that we've done, and we're also reviewing those right now. And those are the ones that are top of mind. I think regularly we do look at our fees and update them.
Thank you. No further questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you, Your Worship. With item 16 having been dispensed with earlier, that is the end of the formal agenda.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Robinson to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I wish everybody a happy International Day of the Family tomorrow. Before we take question period,